game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One2one.
The Figurine, Phone Swap, October 1, Swallow, and Nikulapo, and my personal favorite, Mechanic. Kunle Afolayan is a multiple award-winning Nigerian filmmaker and entrepreneur, and one of the leading lights in the development and progress of the Nigerian film industry. Kunle Afolayan, welcome to One2one.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
A real pleasure. You are quite the icon in the industry, are you not? And yes, quite a punishing schedule as well. You've been at Cannes, and you've only just got back, haven't you? So what was that like for you?
Oh, it was good. I mean, I've been going to Cannes for 17 years. So, and...
Not a rookie.
Well, yeah, but again, every year you get to meet new people. There's some people you only see once in a year, and that is where you get to see them. But there's a bit of progress, at least a Nigerian film, got official selection and was celebrated. So that is also something good for Nigeria.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Cannes was good.
Yeah, it was good.
And now you're here with us.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us again. So let's talk about Nollywood a bit. Over the last 30 years, of course, it's grown in leaps and bounds. You've seen it all, haven't you? From the start up until now, it's grown in terms of cinematography, production design, all aspects of film. But I'd like to ask you, really, has Nollywood truly arrived? Would you say that it is now able to stand shoulder to shoulder with its competitors in other climes? And I'd like you to talk as well a bit about some of the challenges that you feel the industry is facing at this point in time.
Nigeria is doing well in terms of, as a matter of fact, I'll give credit to the streaming platforms like Prime, like Netflix, because a few years ago, it was a struggle to raise funds. And then after raising funds, it was a struggle to get the film distributed. Everybody was focusing on cinemas, and there were a few, TVs were not licensing film. So there were very few, windows to distribute your films. But when the likes of Netflix and Prime came, the story changed. A lot of the filmmakers are now rich. At least they can afford. Lifestyle has changed because they were getting paid in dollars, and then Netflix and Amazon licensed. Or rather, they commission slates where you're given, like a job for a number of years, and all. So that changed the entire narrative, and that was really good for Nigeria. And that also helped to improve on the quality of the films that we were doing, because if your quality does not fit or what the required standard for those platforms, your films will not, be considered. So that is where we are now.
But I'm very pleased that you've spoken about some of the challenges with funding, distribution, and how the streaming platforms have assisted the industry and players in the industry. But of course, you will realize that not too long ago, and it's no longer news, that streaming platforms like Amazon Prime and Netflix announced actually that they would stop commissioning original content, not just from producers in Nigeria, but across Africa. There are those, of course, who attribute that to the general economic situation and low subscriber numbers. And there are those who also say that Those who keyed into these contracts, many of them actually just were not able to step up their game and deliver. So as we're being forced, your industry is being forced to reassess its relationships with these streaming platforms. So what do you think that portends for the future of the industry, and how do you think that you will deal with that?
I've been around long enough to, I have a clear understanding of what works and what doesn't work. Some films, first of all, Netflix is not going anywhere. Prime is not going anywhere. And, let me put that in a very layman term. If they're going, it means they're going to remove all the films, all Nigerian films that are on the platform. They will remove them. But you know what? Some of these films are licensed in perpetuity.
They're contractual obligations.
Yeah, so it's there.
Yeah.
Some of the films are licensed for 5 years. So the fact that they said, oh, we're not going to commission original content does not mean that the ones that they have commissioned or the ones that they already have on the platform will be removed.
Sure.
So they still have presence. And it's the same with Prime. I was in Brazil, was it last year? And this was also in the news. Prime pulled from Brazil. Brazil is big. They have the numbers and all of that, but Prime pulled. I think they pulled from a couple of countries. So it's not something that is peculiar to only Nigeria. And again, if they're saying, look, it's not making economical sense, to them, you really can't. We don't have the data, we don't have proof or evidence, to show. But I am very sure that they're not gone. I think at some point they probably will come back, and then they're still licensing. So if you have a good film that you've made, and then you can pitch it to them, they are open to that. But what they're saying is they're not going to commission or an original, where they put no. But it doesn't stop us from still making content. You can make it if you're sure that it's good enough. Then you sell to them,
of course,
and all of that. So, but again, we need to start developing our own thing. I said this before, and people were always like trick thing. Before Netflix and Amazon, we were making film. Before Netflix and Amazon, we were building, a portfolio. We were also building catalogs. I've shot about 7, 8 films before Amazon or Netflix came.
Sure.
October 1 was the first film Netflix licensed in Nigeria. And this was 2014.
Great film, by the way.
Thank you. But in 2014, Netflix didn't have like a presence in Nigeria. So the film was licensed for Europe, America, and Asia. But this was 12 years, and this was 11 years ago, thereabout. And then by the time they came back, they now wanted to do more in the space. And really, truly, when you say African cinema, look, Nigeria is in forefront, and then will be followed by South Africa, right? In terms of number, in terms of everything. So countries like, Ghana, for example, Netflix doesn't have any presence in Ghana. What should they do? Should they kill themselves? They're not to talk of all the other Francophone countries and all of that. It's business. And these guys are looking for where to invest, and then, of course, they will respect, ROI and all of that. So
we need viable alternatives.
Absolutely. So we need to develop, if you have an app that only caters for Nigerians and is secured, and you can do original content and put on them, we have large numbers. Even if what you're able to get is just, let's even say, 10-20% of the population. In fact, let's say 10% of the population. If you get 1 million or 2 million streaming, You know, that is even like, is that 1% of the entire population? If you get that in one title, and there's fair sharing formula between the producer and the platform owner, I don't think you need more than that.
Sure.
What Netflix and Amazon has done for us, or what they've helped to do, is to expose our films, to the world. For example, an Anikulapo film, Anikulapo done purely in Yoruba, 100% Yoruba language film, happened to stream and got to #1 most watched film globally. What more can you ask for? So if that is all we managed to get from those platforms, I think is great. Because before we were playing local, you can, if anybody says to you, my film is showing in London, except if you book hall and then you get the Nigeria community to come and see, or your film premieres or is selected in festivals. Outside of that, we weren't playing any game outside, But this streaming has helped us. But then we need to have platforms that will cater for Nigeria. Some can build the ones that will cater for the continent, for Africa, and all of that. But it takes a lot. There's one called Sacred, which is open, and a lot of people now whose films are not doing global release on Netflix, they go to Sacred because that is showing in UK, US, and all of that. Because Netflix license some films to only, stream in Africa. So you have the right to take your film to other platform. And that is a Nigerian owned thing, and I know that they put a lot of films and, it's being supported, but then how well is it managed? How sustainable is it? Because I haven't been hearing much about it in recent time. So we need to support, we need to come together, we need to build platforms that will cater for, for us or for the continent.
Absolutely. So rather than devoting, I think from what I'm hearing from this is that Netflix, Amazon Prime, that is not the future. The future is in developing our own innovative platforms that will ensure that we're not spending a lot of time trying to warm ourselves into the good graces.
Let me quickly, in India, they've always, I used to do what you call traveling theater, traveling cinema, which was something I sort of inherited or learned from my father, and we'll take projector. I remember we did it a lot with Figurine, even October 1, even in Rapada, where we'll go to schools and then, we'll take our projector and then we'll show films, This is still a model that works in India, and why India has grown so much is because they've focused on their immediate environment first. They have local small community cinemas in every local government, so you don't have to drive, before you could see a film. You just walk out of your room and there's one down the road, and and these are things that help build or help communal relationship development, and all of that. So we shouldn't just put all our eggs in one bag and say if it's streaming or nothing. No, there are other windows. We should continue to develop every available window. I know that in Lagos, during Fashola, they wanted to do community cinemas. I was on that advisory board. And then when Ambode came, they built some cinemas, theaters in, the communities, I think the 6 geographical zones of Lagos or something. But of course, I think most of those cinemas or theaters are dead, So those are some of the problems we have. You can have the fun, build things, but then how well do we manage?
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah. And of course, like us, India has a huge population. We have that benefit
Absolutely.
as well. So let me press in a little bit further on that point. So a number of points that you've already raised. Time was, of course, and particularly prior to the streaming era, when many of our films were confined to the fringes of viewership, local viewing, and all of that. And of course, along came streaming, and as you said, it has helped expose the craft, expose the industry. But we find, of course, a very heartwarming trend in more recent times. Many of our movies are making their way, finding their way to film festivals internationally, Toronto, Sundance, Berlin, and more recently, the Cannes Film Festival, where for the first time in 80 years, a Nigerian movie became very much talked about at the last Cannes Film Festival. My question is, has this happened because of the deliberate effort of those in charge of the industry, regulators, industry decision makers? Or have people like you and actors, jobbing actors day by day and film producers, just managed to hack it? Have you just found your way through, through all of this, or do you owe this to what the regulators and decision makers have done?
Well, I don't think the regulators have played much role, in getting us to the promised land. Well, I'll give credit to this new minister of, tourism, art and culture and creative economy for at least bringing back, the Nigerian pavilion in Cannes. We used to have that, in those days. And I mean, it used to be a very vibrant pavilion where people from different African countries, will come there to chill, and even when we're not discussing films, it's like the embassy, like African embassy in Cannes. And then at some point that died, and we didn't have pavilion for many years. So when Nigerians, when you find yourself in Cannes, you're just, like chilling around. Exactly. And during Amber Day, there was also a Lagos pavilion. It was a beautiful initiative, and I remember that made significant mark, at that period. And that was the last time we ever had until, this year, with the new minister. I think the stakeholders have individually contributed their quota to the development of the industry, and that has helped a great deal. But then I feel that one of the things we need to do, and again, when I teach, because when I talk to a lot of young filmmakers, I always like to understand why they want to be in film, because some of them, I mean, they all have different reasons, Some of them sees it as an avenue to get popular. Some of them think it's actually easy, and some are true creatives, The reason why most of the films, and go and check, most of the films that have selections in top festivals, for example, My Father's Shadow, it's because it's a co-production, with Britain and and other platforms. Sure. And the funding was from there. So they have stake in it, and then they know how to play the politics. They know the right language to speak, when submitting, because it's a co-production. Absolutely. There has been great and amazing films, made in this country that, didn't make it to festivals because they're independent film, by individual. No matter how great the film is, if it doesn't have the push or backing of even government have got roles to play.
Absolutely.
So if, for example, a country like Nigeria as a country picked a film and, they decided to put their like weight behind it, and they try to help to play the politics in that zone, the films will fly better than, I mean, there was that Mami Water. That's another film that, travel festivals,
Sure.
but why? It was because it was a co-production film, no Nigerian money.
Wow.
So, and again, as a filmmaker, look, it's not, you need to decide, do you want to make films that will travel festivals and you'll be running around festivals and you will be known in festivals, but you won't be able to make commercial film and make good money? Or you want to make commercial films and do box office hit like Funke Akindele in Nigeria, and everybody loves you, and you are in that zone and you are enjoying it.
You're enjoying it.
So that is something that the filmmaker also need to first, you need to decide where you want to play. And the genre of your film would determine where you play. For example, when I started, with the Rapada and Figurine, I didn't want to make just commercial film. Figurine went to several film festivals around the world. The same, same as October 1. But I was conscious of the fact that I wanted to do a film that is arty, but at the same time will give commercial appeal. Go and check most of the films that get selected in festivals. They are festival film. They won't sell in cinemas.
It's always been that way.
They're art film. Yeah. So for me, there's nothing wrong with making art film, but it's your call, to say, look, this is where I want to play. This is what I want to be known for. I want to be known as an author, or I want to, it's up to you. But I feel that there has been more effort by individuals, in moving the entire, just like Afrobeat. Who do you give the credit for where Afrobeat has got into? It's purely the artist. It's got nothing to do with, government or, structure or regulators or anything. No, it's artists pushing their thing, and then God said, "Army to it." So yeah.
I mean, we haven't recognized, obviously, we haven't recognized enough the importance of soft power.
Yes.
Using your industry to push the interest of the country. And that's enough incentive for the government of the country to get behind your art. But since you mentioned it, I'd like us to talk about this much talked about film at the last Cannes Film Festival, My Father's Shadow, chosen from over 2,900 film submissions made. How did that make you feel, and what are your thoughts concerning that particular movie and the circumstances surrounding it?
I didn't get the opportunity to see, My Father's Shadow. I tried, but I couldn't get ticket. But after those who watched it, we were talking about it, and I think it's amazing that, I don't like when people will see a film and then a few minutes you forget it. But these engaged people, and everybody was talking about it, and that got me really curious. And of course, I think that there's a special mention to, I think, the lead actor, in Cannes, and that's also, that's a great achievement, But again, we have to be deliberate, when it comes to what you're trying to achieve with the different titles. Not every film is meant for festival, and not every film is meant for box office. So there has to be a sort of balance. So yeah. But I look forward to seeing, My Father's Shadow, and yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Kunle. I highlighted that for one or two very specific reasons. And I'd like to pose this question to you. Considering the theme and the story movies like that, My Father's Shadow, and more to the point, many movies that you have made. What can you tell me about the power of film to witness and to chronicle the history and experience of our times, and indeed the responsibility it has? Because I'm sure, I'm certain, talking to you, that that is the sort of meaningful space in which you have always aspired to be. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Okay, so My Father's Shadow is set in 1993, during the Abiola thing. The last 6 years I've been working on a story that is set in the same period. But somebody was really commending like the production design for the film, because it was set in 93. But if you look at least my films that are like, the periodic ones, like October 1 and Swallow. For me, Swallow is even my favorite, of my films, now. Why? Swallow is an adaptation of Sefi Atta's book, and the original name of the book is Swallow. And it's set in 1985. And what got me really interested in the film was, I remember 1985, and I remember vividly most of the things I was doing as a young boy in Ebutemeta. And because the way the story was written, it was originally set in those areas between Surulere and Yaba and Ebutemeta, and it's the same, and that is my zone.
Yeah.
And that got me really curious. Padebo, may the Lord rest his soul, was, one of our, the best production designers we have. And we tried to work on the film, but it wasn't available. So I did a production design of that film myself. And I've always established that I'm not into film just to entertain people. I don't make film for entertainment reason only. I make films to inform. I make films to teach. I make films to document, and then I make film to entertain. But entertainment is like the least of, the reasons why I make film, because, like I said, we're not good at archiving, history, and records here, and audiovisual is one of the best tool, or format you can use to like put information, or store information, preserve information. And I did that too. And there were things that were not in the book that, okay, I thought, look, if I bring this, like the golden effect, the golden eaglet win.
Yeah, no,
that year, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to interplay this in the film, and I'll put it at different, and I'll start with the quarterfinal till the final, and I think we used it brilliantly. What's it called? I shot in Broad Street, and I went to look at what Broad Street was in 1985, and that really cost a lot, but then I didn't compromise on it. We shut down Broad Street and blocked it and brought in almost 200 vehicles to fill, the road, and things we couldn't do on set. We did a few in CGI, but not like adding props. No, it's more of cleanups. But almost all the vehicles that were there were all vintage vehicles that I brought in, But again, it's so that this younger generation who didn't know what Broad Street was like then, could see it in the film. With October 1, we did a whole lot, to also like, and I'm glad that October 1 did its bit. I mean, it got the kind of attention that I was, I expected, it to get, and I was really happy about that. Films like this, again, I can't wait to see it, so I could talk more about it. But people were really fascinated about the interplay between, the military. I don't want to bring spoiler. People need to see the film. I think it's coming to cinemas soon. But this film is going to serve as a tool, archival tool, that has preserved, our history, to a very large extent. Most of the Gen Zs now, most of them don't even know who MKO Abiola is, but through the film, they will see a bit of the struggle, of that time. They will see how, if you're walking on the street and you see a military man, your heart will first cut that time. That was what it was, but now we don't even care about uniform people. We just, so that is the role and significant role of such powerful film in our society, and I look forward to seeing it, and I hope people will do more of such. Yeah.
And of course, many of your movies, as we've discussed, have done precisely the same. All right, so Kunle, let's talk about collaboration. Well, one of the very significant trends, particularly in the music industry, is the advantage that Afrobeats musicians, for example, have taken of being able to reach across the pond to collaborate with colleagues in Western countries. Thinking, for example, about Davido and Omah Lay, Burna Boy, 2one Savage. But we don't see an awful lot of that energy in Nollywood. I suppose the first question is how necessary is it in the first place? And secondly, is it something that's desirable, and why don't we see much of that?
I think we don't have that kind of structure. And again, the budget. When I wanted to do October 1, I first tried it with the CEO. With the CEO, yeah, it was the CEO. I was going to use John Malkovich to play the role Angelique Kidjo played. Right. And at some point I got his number. I was calling his house. But of course he won't talk to me because I'm not an agent. Yeah. And if I'm to reach him, I'm supposed to go through the agent to talk to him. So the agents are supposed to be talking, not a desperate producer like me just trying to break the. But we've actually made tremendous effort and achieved some. In October 1, we have 3 colonialists. The oldest among them, David Bailey, that's his name. It was actually the guy with the parrot in Pirates of Caribbean. Oh, right. If you watch all the episodes of the older guy with the parrot, that is David.
Yeah. I've seen October 1, but you'll be pleased to know that I have not seen Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, really?
Quite deliberately. Yes. So nice. I prefer your films.
Yeah, thank you. So, but when I wanted to do that, I didn't want to just get some white folks, like we normally would do because we don't have budget and all of that. I didn't want to do that. I wanted professionals, and I engaged like an agency, in the UK to help source for, and they will send list of actors that they've considered, and then I would do Skype, audition, with them. And that was how we were able to get some of those actors, And the new season of our Anikulapo series, so it's no longer just a story of Oyo and, it's been expanded. And we're going to have colonialists in this. And these colonialists are Portuguese. And I actually got them from Portugal. We engaged, we went on their LinkedIn, and then we found the management, contact, and we reach out. As a matter of fact, it was Nigerians, if we are just interesting people. If we want to do something, we break all the barriers and we get it done.
Of course.
There was an actor I wanted, and look, in 5 days, we pull it off and we brought him to Ghana. There was another one we wanted, and we pulled it off and we brought him to Cap Village. you know. So that is the kind of level where we play. But if we want to play in the bigger level, it must be like a co-production, like what my father's shadow, like what Half of the Yellow Sun did. Half of the Yellow Sun, they brought Chiwetel. Even he was a Nigerian, but then is big.
Of course.
John Boyega, was just starting then. Tandy Newton, and all of those people are big actors. So we've played in those spaces. I can't remember most of the other films, but I think we've done. There are quite a number of films that we've done, but taking it to the next level, I think it also depends on the kind of story you're telling. I mean, I don't think anybody will want to just incur unnecessary expenses because they want to feature Hollywood actors in their film. So that is really my take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, the existential issue here is it's money, isn't it? Very important. So let's talk about funding, and this has come up a number of times in this conversation already. Talk to me about, I mean, the challenges are obvious, but the mechanics of seeking funding and support in your industry. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think people use different kind of approach. For me, I've always had to borrow money, even from Irapada days. We had to look forward to raise money through family and friends. And then when we got to Figurine, I started getting loan from banks, even up to October 1. So phone swap was a bit different. Phone swap, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. We wanted to do the film. Then I got approached by, an organization that said they wanted to buy into our company, and they proposed something, and I realized that these guys are gonna take over my company, even though we're not that big then. So I thought no, and they said, okay, we can do project together, and we agreed to do the film. Phone swap, and we registered phone swap as SPV, and when it was time for them to disburse their own contribution to us, at that time I think they were meant to put in 40 million, and I'm talking 2011, and they weren't forthcoming. I already put all the crew. Everybody was ready. We were going on set. They said, oh, go, don't worry, tomorrow we'll credit. But the money never came. Glow signed me as an ambassador, so what they paid me, I put it in. We got like product placement deal also, partnership, I put that in. So I've always funded film in an unconventional way. I've always looked for, apart from borrowing money, where else can we like subsidize our budget? And so if we're making a commercial film, we look for companies that are doing products where, that can buy into, we give them services by exposing their product placement, and all of that. And for companies who are, okay, so another example is with October 1, we got Toyota, to partner with us as official partner. But there wasn't Toyota in Nigeria in 1960. So we couldn't use Toyota in the film. But then they did things around the film. So you just need to understand how to pitch and the language to speak. If they are not doing things in the film, they can leverage your name, and what your brand could bring to their brand. And then they will, and I remember we had our first press conference, announcing the shoot. We had it in a Toyota showroom, and you know that when you do that, all the pictures and images that goes to press,
of course,
are going to have, Toyota, and all of that. And during the premiere, there was like, a proper, the representation of the brand also. But generally, I think, BOI was one of the banks that started giving loan for production.
Absolutely.
I think Access Bank also started what they also call Film Fund or Nolly Fund one time. But you can only access those loans if you have a structured company that can present, because they will ask you for plenty paper and a lot of English. So if you don't have like tax record, if you don't have audited account, if your company is not properly registered, if you cannot access all of those funds.
It's development finance.
Exactly. So but for us, we have a structure, and that is why we've been able to access some of these funds.
Yes.
And when you borrow money to make film, you'll be very conscious of the fact that you must pay back. So the film better be good, and a lot of times, when people get free fund, they make horrible films, especially if it's someone who's just starting and they just want to prove, that they could. Oftentimes they make a lot of terrible films. So it's important to understand that film is business, and at the same time, it's a work of art. Yes. If there's a balance, then I think you're good.
Yeah. And Kunle, I think it's fair to say that you and I can agree that you don't make terrible films.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
But I'd like to take you back a little bit
Yes.
to our earlier conversation about streaming platforms.
Yes.
And the fact that, the fact is that your industry is having to reassess its relationships with these big purchasers of local content. But I'd like you to hold that thought and the things you said about that, and to think about the innovation that you spoke about. We have to become more innovative in the way we create the avenue for this content to get out so that we're not dependent on Netflix and Amazon Prime. At the other end of the spectrum, in your industry, the cheaper end, there is the YouTube phenomenon.
Yes.
Actually.
Yeah.
And big movies have been released in terms of viewership. I can think of one quite recently. Can I ask you to comment on that? Tell me what your take is on that phenomenon and what.
No, I think it's the future. I think we also recently opened a channel, and it's called Capstream. And we've put some of our films that are off Netflix. We put them there. We put Figurine, we put Phone Swap, and we even started with this big CEO, and look, these help to, it's going to give the kind of exposure that a Netflix will give.
Yes.
If really those films get the right publicity, it's easy for anybody to just go on YouTube, like on your phone or on your, but the only issue with YouTube is it's very porous. Like anybody can go there and copy your film. They copy on Netflix and all of that as well, but I think it's more porous on YouTube, But then if your film gets the right viewership and then you're making the right, remuneration, as you should, you will worry less about, who is copying. Because if you copy it, you can't put it back on YouTube. All right. And then you cannot sell to Amazon and all of the other licensed, platforms.
Sure.
You can only put it on either bootleg, and people don't watch DVD anymore, or you create your own website where you all So I think YouTube is like a big deal. And everybody is embracing it. Even the actors are now having YouTube channels.
Absolutely.
And we also have one, so it's great.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And you're hearing phrases like Odogu Parara.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I learned about recently from my wife, actually.
Yeah.
Kunle Afolayan, you are obviously hugely successful in your own right.
Yeah.
You represent this constituency that you have chosen to represent the cultural voice of this country, and particularly Yoruba film. But let's talk about your father. We were always going to get there, were we not? Now dearly departed, passed away in 1996. And interesting to hear from you today that you actually learned the business, or at least the business side of the business, very, very early. So the great Adeyemi Josiah Afolayan, affectionately known as Ade Love, a renowned Nigerian filmmaker, actor, director. What an extraordinary legacy. I remember we spent quite a lot of time at the National Theatre as children. We saw movies like Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta, and A Star is Born, but we also saw Taxi Driver, Ija Orogun, Yaniwura. Some of your father's more famous projects. And of course, there was also Hubert Ogunde, and there were others as well. And those works made a tremendous impact on the cultural space and on the trajectory, the progress of this country. I'd like to ask you, what impact you feel that this golden era in Nigerian filmmaking has had, really, not just on your work, but on the general body of work that exists and that is growing today. And do you feel that this legacy, the legacy of this era, bears enough relevance to the progress of the modern era of filmmaking in this country? Is there enough recognition and is there enough learning from that period?
Okay, so I'll pick it from, your last questions. I think there's not enough recognition and there's not enough learning. And that's what I said about the fact that, we're not a country, we're a country where people pay less attention to history. If you Google Nigerian cinema or Nigerian film, you probably will see Ogunde's name first. But Baba Ogunde made Aye after my father made his second film, Kadara. So like I said, Olabalogun introduced most of them to film. There were some films made before then, but these were done by the colonial, guys. And but the core cultural films were made in the late 60s into early 70s, and all of that. And Olabalogun's first commercial success film was Ajani Ogun. Ajani Ogun was shot in 1976. And Ajani Ogun featured Ade Love and Drola Adepo. And it was from there that my father thought, look, we're all doing traveling theater. We can actually adapt some of our plays to film. And then they relied on Olabalogun's technical expertise, to help with, getting cameras and crew and the team. And that was how it all started. Up till now, I remember when we wanted to do Anikulapo, I screened Ija Ominira to my crew, especially the costume people and all of that. And we used some of the things as reference to say, look, back then, this was what it was. This is how the houses are. If you look at my film, look at Anikulapo, for example, you never see any set with roofing sheets. I see it in a lot of films. A lot of people say they are doing period films.
Those are
and
all
then,
thatched
and then the roofs are, roofing sheets. Yeah. No, you can't. It's and those films will win award. They won. Some of them will win even in that production design category. So I wonder who the juries are, what they are doing really. But my point really is, if you study history, you can feed off. You can, see facts and, pick things. So I'm always, in fact, there were some, so there are things that I'll watch my father's films, I'll watch Ogunde's film. Now, look at Owobo Ogunde, who played Basharu in Anikulapo series season 1. One of the reasons I worked with him was to bring back the Ogunde legacy and memory. And I have pictures of my father and Ogunde together. And whenever it is we're filming, I'm always saying, look, come, let's recreate what our fathers, did like 40 years ago, 50 years ago,
So you've done quite a lot. Obviously, it's fair to say that's a bit of an understatement, actually. At this stage in your career, obviously, we're serving primarily a country.
Yeah.
And of course, you have a global platform as well. Would you say that you have a firm handle on what Nigerian consumers actually want? We see quite a lot out there. I've already said I'm a particular fan of your local expression. But would you say that you have a firm handle on what our consumers actually want?
No, I don't. In fact, these days I'm surprised by, the kind of reaction you get. There are films that I will see and I'll be like, what is this? And the next day, the whole place is buzzing and everybody is saying it's the best thing that has happened to the industry and all of that. And then who are you to, you go and sit down with your opinion, you really, but again, and that is why Nigerian audience are they are very difficult to predict.
Perhaps fickle.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I don't want to. There was a time the cinemas would say, "Oh, only make comedy film if you want to make money in cinemas." And I've never really. I'm not one of those who will follow those kind of. Because as a filmmaker, you should be able to do different genres. And I'm not making film solely so that I can make box office hit or make money in box. No, I'm making film for posterity.
Sure.
I'm making films that people want to put on their shelf. I'm making films that 20, 30 years to come, people will still, if it comes out on a different format or in a different format, people still want to have it. Yesterday, or no, the day I was going to Cap Village, I just checked my DVD and Blu-ray collections, and I saw I have collections of Game of Thrones, to up to season 8, and I took everything. Then I have collections of Woody Allen's works, and there are like 10, is a collection, and I took it. And then, I was struggling to run the DVD. So I said, when I'm back in Lagos today or tomorrow, I'll buy a new DVD because I want to play back.
Play back, yes.
That is what I want my films to do. I want people to, still stumble on them and want to keep them, because with a DVD, you can play back director's commentary, you can play back different features. Things you can't do on streaming platforms, so that is the kind of,
Absolutely.
that's what I want.
So you're an incredibly accomplished filmmaker.
Thank you.
Producer, director, name it. The Figurine, October 1, phone swap,
Thank you.
citation to Anikulapo. My personal favorite, may surprise you, but I think we've talked about it before, is Mechanic.
Yeah, you said so.
It's very simply Mechanic.
Yeah.
I just absolutely loved it and what that movie represents. I remember you saying your son was in it.
Yes.
But I'd like to ask you what you consider, or what you would consider to be the Holy Grail. What is it that you really would like to achieve? And I know you've touched on it somewhat already, but just to give you a chance to tell us, what is it that you would like to achieve before you hang up your boots?
Well, I just would like to raise, or rather inspire more young people, and hoping that one day one of them will be able to tell my story. You know, there was a young guy that used to work with me before, and you know, I was hoping he would be the one to tell my story one day, but so you know, so but hopefully one day maybe he will still. But honestly, all I want to do is give back, you know, train people, inspire people. I do a lot of, you know, I have a foundation and I do a lot of, you know, infrastructural development in communities. I also have a scholarship, you know, that scholarship program for students, you know, in different places. I've never mentioned it anywhere. It's never been, because for me, I'm not doing this thing to gain, you know, I'm not a politician and I'm not trying to gain followership, and I'm not doing it so people can say, oh, he's helping people. No, that's between me and God and the people that, you know, I'm able, you know, to support. So really, I just want to continue to support.
Amazing. Thank you so very much for a most exhilarating conversation. Kunle Afolayan.
Thank you
very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.